on Fireside.
Okay, hi. I'm here. This is Wendy, and we are in the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is the first time we're doing video for this podcast, and this is on the Fireside app. So it's going to be a little bit different than normal because you might normally listen to this podcast and it's a clubhouse room and we're having a conversation. This is a wellness and woo episode, which means that we are talking about my favorite things, wellness and woo things. Now, I am a Reiki practitioner. I do a lot of energy healing. I infuse all of this stuff into my work with entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders because I feel like it's important for us to understand how we're using our energy and to make sure that we're using it wisely. Now, in that, I have learned a lot about different types of practices that I'm very curious about, I want to know more about, and I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for people to join me in understanding these practices. So one of them is human design, and that is what we're here to talk about today. We have one of my friends, Mystic Maquina, who is someone I met on Clubhouse, and we're going to be talking about how human design can help you manifest the business of your dreams. I think that as I've learned more about human design, it is eerily accurate to telling me what I have been doing wrong as a person in general. It does not strictly apply to business. It also applies to relationships, to your love life, to all of the things that you do every single day, the decisions that you don't know why you unconsciously make, whether that's through your nature or your nurture. Human design has some answers. And I'm very curious to know more about what those answers are and how they come about. So I'm going to invite Shaina to come on video and to join me in this conversation. We'll be here for about an hour learning about human design and what it means to you as an entrepreneur, and particularly for those of us who are trying to help others to understand ourselves better as we try to do that. So are you here and can you hear me, Shaina?
I am here. I can hear you.
Yay. Well, welcome to my living room. This is my living room studio. And I love your hair. This is not the look that you have in your photos. So I'm digging this.
That's like another picture that's circulating, and I'm like, I look like three different people. Yeah.
I was like, who is this girl? Who is this girl?
This girl woke up at 1 a.m. and was like, perusing TikTok and was like, you know what? I'm going to cut my bangs. So I did. I went in the bathroom and I was like, and then I was like, what am I doing right now?
I love that you did that at 1 a.m. Like, that's the best. It's so funny. I have done like brash things with my hair, and I did the same thing the other day. I actually saw these split ends and I went in the bathroom and I just started like hacking at them. And then I was like, oh, it actually looks like my layers look so much better without. So I admittedly did the same thing the other day. Right?
Something must have been in the air.
I don't know. Maybe it's in my human design.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious because I'm now a convert to human design. I know you have heard that I am taking classes and understanding how to read charts, but it's so complicated that I always get lost in the mix. So the first thing that I ask even my human design teacher is, how do you explain this to people who are not into woo-woo things? Because I think that when I explain it, I get into this rabbit hole of like, it's all these things and they're all in one. And I'm sure there's a much better way to talk to people about this. So I'm going to let you introduce the topic and I'm going to hang out here. And then I have like some other follow-up question.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think when it comes to anything the human design system is very dense and very intimidating, especially when you first see this chart thing. You're like, what am I looking at? And what do these words even mean? Like, you look at the explanation and you're like, this doesn't make any sense, right? So when I talk about human design and what it is, I basically keep it simple. It is a system that gives you a map of your energy and guidance on how to live a more aligned life, right? As an individual, as a unique person in this world. And that's the basics of it. Now, if someone's not really into woo-woo stuff, they're really skeptical, they probably have gate 63, the gate of doubt, and that's okay. It's not, my job or my intention to change anyone's mind or try to prove anything to them. So if they're not typically into this kind of stuff, then they might not be into human design, and that's okay. Like, it's not going to be for everybody. Do I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not being curious about it and at least exploring it a little bit? Yes. But I'm not here to change anyone's mind, right? So that would be my answer to that.
I love it because you touched on a couple of things that I think are important. So, one, different people have different traits. And in this system, they're kind of around these ideas of gates. And so I'll let you explain the whole like system in a minute. But when you said the thing about being kind of like their more aligned self, that also I've gotten people tripped up in the religion aspect, and people want to ask, is this some cult, is this related to some particular religion, like where did this come from? So can you explain first like how this came about, where it got founded, and then I have a follow-up, like maybe more risky question about the founding of the system.
So the founding of the system, yeah, not anywhere rooted in religion at all. It's a crazy story. This man, Ra Uruhu, was out, I believe, in Spain in Ibiza, and he got this download. He heard a voice. He got this download over 8 days and 8 nights of this system. So that's how it originated. If anyone is skeptical, that would make them more skeptical, I'm sure. But that's how it started. And then he wrote a book about it, which became the foundations of human design about, I think, 2 years after he had this conversation with the voice. And so, but what I love about human design is it does take from different components of different things like the chakra system and astrology and things that aren't rooted in religion. They're just different modalities and different practices, right? So it takes from these ancient type of practices as well as modern practices and some scientific stuff that's really super difficult to understand, and puts it all together in a way that once you understand it is pretty easy, and really, really like has a ton of information in there, right? So, yeah, that's how it started. And I'd love to know your risque question.
Yeah. So I think that that's a really good way to explain how it's all melded together, because my understanding is it's like seven different systems that are probably things that were already ancient teachings and in the vernacular kind of known sciences, not science, spirituality, whatever. And then this guy kind of just found a way to bring it all together. And in that storyline, I've heard multiple places. So this is like word on the street is he also was in Ibiza, sort of taking a break from reality because he had, the financial ability to do so, and was partying like people do in Ibiza. And so there may or may not have been some sort of substances, psychedelic substances, involved in his download of this system. And so I was wondering if you've heard something similar, and what is the word on your street about this whole download situation?
Wow. No, I mean, I've heard that as well. I don't know. I don't like to speculate on like how he got his download, but I do think that, there are, even in ancient practices, there's people who take certain psychedelics and things like that to, have visions. And that's important to them and to their culture. So, if that's what he ended up doing to get this download, that was an amazing trip, because this system is so really just incredible when you think about it. For someone to come up with all of this in 8 days, I mean, I don't know if he had any prior knowledge of all of these systems or anything, but yeah, it's just crazy how he came up with this in 8 days.
Yeah.
It's taken me
In
6 years
Like if you
to.
think about like the place that you would be to be tripping that hard for
Yeah,
8 days,
right.
like let's just talk about the fact that it was like 8 day trip. Like that in itself is like, all right, that's a little bit much. But then he was downloading information, somehow like writing it or transposing it to where it could be like had later as an analysis to put into a book. And then now there's this like definitive guide, but then the guide never got finished because the guy died. Like there's all these different parts of it that are just so fascinating to me. And it makes me laugh when you paraphrase it, because you're like, WTF are these people? Why are these people believing in this thing? And I would have normally been in that skeptic place. I don't know if I have the gate that you're talking about. I have to look at my chart. But I think once I started hearing people tell me about myself, I would be in clubhouse rooms where people are reading my chart, just crying on mute. I'm like sitting there like, how do they know these things about me? Oh my God, I'm so vulnerable, but they can't see me crying. They can't, so just like suck it up and like don't sound like you're crying. And so I was like, well, what is this weird like juju magic that this thing has that is making me cry when people are telling me about myself? And then of course, as I've gotten further into the work, it has brought out all of the spiritual work that I needed to do, but it was, I didn't have the words to describe what I was doing wrong. And I didn't have the words to describe what I needed to do right, nor did I know what I needed to do right. Like that wasn't even a thing. So when I started using human design to look at my strategy and the different things I needed to be doing, I went, oh, this actually makes sense. And so the convert for me was nothing to do with the story and the guy in Ibiza party, but it was very much about the deep rooted work that only I would know I needed to do. And when I figured out that this could provide me as a resource, then I was completely in. So I'm curious for you, like how did you, how did you convert to human design? Like, how did that happen?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm just like I think I have like an eyelash in my eye. I'm sorry. So I keep like blinking, winking at you. So for me, it was about almost 6 years ago, and I just stumbled across it. I don't even remember how. And I stumbled across it online. I got my chart and I looked at it like most people do, and I'm like, uh, I don't know what this means, but because I'm so curious by nature, I was like, okay, I really want to figure this out. I've even like looked at astrology before, and I find astrology really difficult to understand. So, like, I've tried to understand astrology, and I'm just like, I don't get this, and so I put that kind of on the back burner, right? And this was almost like that, but then when I started to really dig into it, I found Ra Uruhu's book because that was really the only thing that was available at the time. And so I started reading that, and the way that he speaks and the way that he writes, and I know that someone else helped him write the book as well. It's still so complicated to understand. It's like, right, like it's like talking to someone who like went to MIT. I used to work with some guys from MIT, and they did like machine learning, and I'd be like, I don't know what you're saying. And that's kind of how I felt with this, but there were certain parts of it that I was understanding, and so I was like, okay, if I can get down the foundations of my chart, then let me just start with that, and maybe once I start understanding that, I can understand the other stuff better. So that was sort of my journey with it. Was just I was just curious. I was like, what is this thing? Because if you go take like your Myers-Briggs or something like that, right, it's pretty straightforward. Like you get a lot of information and you're like, okay, this is cool, like this sounds like me, but now what do I do? But with human design, it was more like, here's a strategy, here's a way that you can actually implement this stuff into your life, that you can make decisions that are right for you. So I found that part of it really interesting and wanted to know more.
Yeah, I know I had a follow-up question that you touched on. I was like trying to remember what it was, so I found it. So do you think people could DIY this situation? Like if they went and got their chart and they saw all the arrows and things on there, would they be able to figure it out? Or like what's the advantage to coming to someone like you? And then remind me again, what is your website? Because I want to put it in the pinned in the link.
It is Mystic Mac, so maq.com.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm gonna put it in
Um,
the little fortune cookie while you.
Awesome. So what I have on my website, I have a generator that you can generate your own chart, and I have my own information in there, my own verbiage, so that you can understand what I call the top five, which is your type, strategy, authority, your not self theme, and your signature. This is all sort of the path to making a good decision for yourself, and I think that when you have those basics down, then you can start looking at the other stuff in human design. But yes, you can DIY it. I mean, there's a ton of information out there now. From when I started to do this, there are schools that you can go to, right? Like Wendy's taking classes. So that's a great way to learn about it a little bit more on your own. But the advantage of going to someone like me is that I've been doing this for a really long time. I work with female entrepreneurs in particular. So I have 12 years of business development consulting experience, and I've sort of married that with human design as well as cycle syncing, which is a whole other thing. But learning how to use your feminine energy in a way that doesn't burn you out, as and using your human design, so you're doing things that you want to be doing in a way that's really easy. So the advantage of coming to someone like me is I can help you decode that whole chart, and you don't have to go down the Google rabbit hole trying to figure out what Ra Uru Hu was trying to say with all of these crazy words. And also, your chart is, you can fall under one of 2 billion combinations. So it's a very, again, very dense system. And the advantage of going to a reader who's experienced is that you'll be able to get the information you need and start using it right away, and also understand. I think a good reader will help you discover what those things mean to you versus reading what other people say this thing means. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I love your response to some of my things. I was like, people always tell me these things, and you're like, no, do whatever you want. I'm like,
Right.
oh, that makes sense. Okay, cool. I mean, because in some ways you're following your intuition, and that's what it's telling you to do. And a lot of the times we act against our intuition. So when we're acting as our quote unquote not self in our not strategy, you're really inhibiting your progression as a person. But when you're acting in this strategy of how you're supposed to be living, your energy is more efficient, you're bringing abundance and manifestation things to you, you're opening yourself up to the universal energy. Like there's all these other things that are benefits with it. And depending on what you believe, I think different parts of it resonate with you when you hear it. But there are definitely parts that are very complex. And I think that that is where going to someone who knows the system inside and out, they can explain it a little easier than even like me, who's like, I don't know. I mean, there's like all these main things, and then there's these other things, and you have to like Google all these things, and it's
And
a
there's
lot.
lines. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're putting it together in different ways, going, I think it means this. But I wanted to get you to explain the basics. So these are the things that I was hoping you could share with people. One, what do you need to run your chart? Because I think it's important for people to understand the level of detail that they need. And then two, when they get the chart back, like what are they going to get out of it essentially? So what are the main things that they'll need to see? And then three, if you could explain the main types of strategies, like the generator and the projector, like those ones, just really quickly so people can start to maybe understand what the system includes. So those are my questions. Rapid
Yeah.
fire. Explain the whole thing.
Okay. So, as far as getting your chart, it's going to depend on where you get your chart from. So, there's lots of places that you can get a free chart. So, my chart is more business centric as far as the information that's in it, but you can use that within your life as well. So, but because I work with entrepreneurs, that's the type of information you would find in my chart. When you go to like Jovian Archive or mybodygraph.com, those are some places you can get a free chart and get some information, and even pay a premium to get more information, which may or may not be helpful. I don't know. But when you're looking at your chart, really looking at the information and not really focusing on the chart itself, and letting that overwhelm you is important. So when you're just starting out, you want to look at your type. So the type is really what you're here to do. And those 5 types are generator, manifesting generator, projector, manifester, and reflector. So generators and manifesting generators are basically, they're both generators, but they have subtle differences. So generators and manifesting generators are here to just do things that light them up. They have sustainable energy to get a lot of work done. So but the manifesting generator works really fast and works on like a million things at once. I am a manifesting generator, so I know all about this. But when you're looking at that specific type, yes, you have that sustainable energy to get a lot done, but if you're misusing your energy on things that you don't want to do, you don't like to do, you feel like you have to do, that's when you experience burnout and exhaustion and just that overall unhappiness with your life, right? Um, for projectors, they are the guides in the world. They're the teachers. They make great coaches and teachers, and because they can really see into the identity of people. So their challenge with that is that they have to wait for someone to actually ask them for that information. So if you go around telling people what's good for them without them asking for your opinion, your advice first, they're not going to receive it well, right? So that's the challenge of being a projector. The reflector is the rarest. So they're basically taking on everybody's energy. They're taking on energy from their environment. So it's really hard for them to discern what's coming from them and what's coming from somewhere else. So they need more time to be able to make big decisions. They need to really take their time, talk it out. And this can take a full lunar cycle, so 28 days. And making smaller decisions, maybe give yourself a few minutes. You don't have to take a month to make any decision, but the big ones, yes. And really, you're here to reflect, right? As a reflector, you're reflecting back what people need to see in themselves. And then the manifester is here to just start stuff, right? They're here to initiate, they're here to start the fire, but they're not the reflector, the projector, and the manifester are not really designed for doing a whole bunch of work and working really hard like the generators, right? They're here to have a specific role and then get other people like the generators and manifesting generators on board to help them get that work done. So those are the main types and kind of what they're here to do. And then within that type, you have your strategy and authority, which your strategy tells you basically we're all waiting for something, right? So generators are waiting for opportunities and for signs of what is coming to them, right? So they're waiting for stuff to be magnetized to them. The manifester is here to initiate. So you're here to have your own inspirations and your own insights and really just express those to people that you trust so they can get on board with helping you, right? Projectors are here to wait for that invitation for people to ask them. And you can also get an invitation by asking, may I offer my opinion? May I offer my advice? Whatever, right? So you can also solicit, right, a little bit of those invitations. And then reflectors are here to wait that 28-day cycle. They're really here to just really, reflect what's coming from them and their environment. So that's sort of the strategy part of it. And then everyone has a unique authority, and that's where in your body, that body intelligence that gives you guidance. So it's like an inner GPS, right? That tells you which is the right way to go, what opportunities are the right ones to take. And then your not self theme is, I call it your check engine light. That tells you like, hey, you're you're going off course a little bit. You might not be in alignment if you're starting to feel frustrated or angry, right? So, and then your signature is the sign that you are doing the right thing. So you take those 5 things. Those are the main things that I think are the most important when you're first starting out with human design.
Man, you just broke that down like so concisely. I was like, wow. And it's a lot of information. And I think if anybody's listening to it, they're probably already overwhelmed with the idea that there's all these things to understand about it. And that's why I say go to somebody who knows about it, because they then can tell you the nitty gritty of that's just the surface. Because then there's the what is it, incarnation crosses, and then there's the channels and the gates,
Channels,
and
gates.
there's like all
Then
these
you've
other
got
things.
like the lines within the gates, and then you've got
Yeah, and
arrows that are pointing different ways. Yeah. So when
yeah,
you
I
really break it down, it can be really simple, but I mean, I've been working with this for 6 years, right? And I don't even know everything. There's like a dream one, there's ones for animals, there's like all kinds of crazy stuff within like the layers of this chart. So what I know and what I'm good at is the basics and then going deeper into your chart. But there's even like a deeper and deeper layer. So it's not something that is just like you're going to pick up right away. But yes, you can DIY it, right? If you're looking at the foundations and start practicing with that.
Yeah, I'm on the half DIY road. So shout out to my teacher, Jacqueline. I'm learning from Interior Creature. So interiorcreature.com. She has gone down the rabbit hole for all of us. Essentially, her blog just has an amazing amount of information. So even if you are DIYing, that's one of the places to go get a lot of stuff in one place. And in a way that's digestible, because I think one of the things you mentioned is that some of this can get really not technical, but in the weeds of things that are not commonplace knowledge. And I think, especially if you're not an energy worker, you start talking about things like energy centers that are open and closed, and just like how energy works throughout you and keeps you, in this sort of, I guess, you're down your journey. And also, you're talking about intuition, that also has to do with these energy centers. And it was interesting when I started learning this that I realized things that I didn't like about myself as traits had an explanation in which energy centers were turned on and off in my design. And I went, oh, I always admired that in someone else. And I've always thought, oh, I wish I could XYZ thing. And you're kind of judging yourself based on this other standard. And one of the things that human design really opened up for me was the understanding of other people's gifts. And like I have my own little package of gifts, and like it's like you could be excited about that once you understand what yours are. But if you're so busy looking at other people's gifts and explaining yourself in terms of their terms, then you're going to always feel like you're in a deficiency, and you're always going to be operating in that shadow, not self kind of way, because you're too busy with this other occupation, looking at everybody else around you. So I think that's one of the other things I learned with human design was how to really appreciate what I'm bringing, and then understand how to further make that gift amplify, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, I can't even tell you how many years I spent thinking like, what the hell is wrong with me? Because I couldn't stick to one thing. I would bounce from this thing, then be interested in this thing, then be interested in this thing. And I'm like, why don't I have a purpose? Like, what's wrong with me? I can't find my thing, right? And I look at my chart for the first time and I read about a manifesting generator and I'm like, oh, like that's how I was designed to be. This is how I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to follow those breadcrumbs and have many passions and purposes in life. And that's okay. Nothing's wrong with me. I have gate 35. I'm a Jane of all trades, right? But that challenge there is that I can do a lot of stuff. It's hard for me to figure out what my thing is, right? So there's all these different parts of my chart that I started to uncover and realize like, no, nothing was wrong with me. It's just how I'm supposed to be. And that's okay. And when I was able to lean into that, my life became so much easier. My business became so much easier. Like everything fell into place. Right. So there's parts of you that you might feel like are negative or traits that you don't like. But when you really dig into them and see like it's okay to just be that and be you, it's really freeing.
I agree. I think I was really appreciative more of the journey that I've been on when I realized I saw the traits. The way I should explain it is you have these gates, and you can explain the gates better than I can. But in those traits that are expressed or not expressed, there's sort of the overexpression and then the underexpression, and then there's the sweet spot in the middle. And that sweet spot in the middle, some things I've worked on enough to where I'm getting close to what that actual gift should be. But then there's other places where I'm like, oh, that work still needs like a lot of things. And I'm learning now also on top of that, that as the sun rotates throughout the year, it lights up these different gates, and life brings you extra things to work on at that time. And eerily enough, as I've been learning more about this, I'm like, oh, that is a challenge that is directly related to this lesson I'm supposed to be here learning. And how many times has the sun hit this gate? And I've tried to learn this lesson probably before, and I didn't. And I'm still here trying to learn this damn lesson. And it's kind of funny because every time I'm thinking like, nothing's going to happen. I'm looking at this chart and I'm just kind of, oh, the sun is where, okay, whatever. And then all of a sudden the life challenge happens and I'm like, oh crap, here's my lesson. So I'm curious to hear what your explanation of this whole like gate channel sun situation is, because this is again one of those like more complex parts of this whole story, because you're not the same all the time. So even though you may have the same design, your nature and nurture sort of situation, the nurture and what's around you changes all the time. So I think I'm still curious about like what other how do you process this idea of the channels and the gates and then the sun?
If you're looking at the chart, you've got two columns on each side, and there's little blocks that go down with symbols and numbers in them. So if you took one of those blocks and you were looking at it, the symbol is the planetary placement, right? So where the planet was in the sky, and each planetary placement has a meaning. So for example, the sun is what you're here to share, right? As to simplify it. And then the number is the gate, and this corresponds to the Chinese I Ching. And that gate will give you the information. So as I was mentioning earlier, I have gate 35, right? So that's that gate that gives me this energy of being really selective over the experiences I want to have and sharing that with the collective, but also, you know, having that challenge of not knowing what my thing is. And that's in my son. So that's something that I'm here to share with people, sharing those challenges with people, and also sharing my experiences and things that, because I'm a 3-5 profile, which is another thing, is you know, I'm here to share those trial and errors, and like, hey, I did this and this didn't work, but this does work. Let me show you, right? So that's what those little blocks can tell you, and that's just one block, right? You have 26 of those, so there's so much information just in the gates themselves. And then if you look at them in the body graph, you'll see them as like little lines that go halfway from one section to another. If there's another gate that meets it, then that's called a channel. And so that channel also has additional information for you to look at. So that's what the gates are. If you don't have, if you're missing something, right, it'll be white, it'll be clear. And as the sun goes through the different gates throughout the year, something that you may not have defined can be activated for you at that time. So we just had the new year. Human Design New Year starts on the 22nd. So it was gate 41. And that's the gate of like pretty much wild fantasies, like letting these things come to you and going after them. And so that was activated for all of us, whether we have it in our chart or not. So it's, and one thing that I do is I send out an email for every transit and say, hey, this is what gate is activated for all of us for the next 6 days. And this is what it means for you in your business, right? This is how you can use this energy right now if you don't have it right normally. So that's kind of how I would, I guess, explain how the transits work, but very similar to astrology.
I need to get on your email list because that sounds like a jam. And so right now we're in, this is the 27th. This is the start of gate 19. Is that where we
Yeah,
are
we're at
right
gate
now?
19. So I actually have an email that goes out tomorrow to let everybody know that we're going to gate 19, how to harness this energy for your business. And yeah, I think it's really important. You know, it's fun. It's like a fun fact, like fun thing to know, like, hey, here's some extra this, right, that you can use right now. If you don't have like the salesman gate, right? Like you're not great at sales, when that's activated for you, then you can go out and like actually use that energy and do more in your business and be more active in it. So I think it's fun to know. It's not something you have to know, right? But it's fun to know, and it's good information that can help you along the way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of explanation in why the things that we enjoy doing in our business, why the things that light us up are what they are. Because like you and I were talking about my chart in particular, and there's this whole theme of community and self, and like it's kind of in some sort of balance, but not always completely balanced. but I still haven't figured out how I'm going to build my community and my business yet, but it is a core part of my intent. And I was mentioning to you that I have this, big part of my dream that includes a model for women to be able to franchise from me. And so as I'm building my thing, I'm also in my head building the steps for women to be able to be part of this community and to have franchises and all these other pieces of it. And I think that some of that, like you were saying, the lack of attentiveness to one thing at a time, because I am a generator and I am always pumping out a lot of things all the time, it seems almost as if I must start, stop, start, stop. It's like this, I've got this little fire over here and I've got this little fire over here, and then I'm going to go over here and do this other little thing. And I was listening to something incredible that Jacqueline, my teacher, was mentioning in one of her lessons that was like, we are taught to be linear thinkers and to be linear doers. So we're taught to start a task and you finish that task, then you go to the other one, and you go to the other one. And some of this is the societal pressures of how we're exposed to learning in school or the workforce and all these other things. But when you understand your human design and you go, oh, but it's okay to have this started and then move to the next thing and then move to the next thing, because ultimately, if you're spending the amount of energy that you're supposed to on the thing and it lights you up, it will get done. It may not get done in a linear fashion and then you move on to the next block and the next block and the next block, but it will get done if you put the energy there. And you have to wait until you're supposed to put the energy there. And the part that I never did before, because I'm such an impatient, naturally impatient person, that I've had to understand what it means to wait and to understand what it means to then have a signal to go and put the energy there. But as I've made that change in my strategy for my business, I've noticed that tasks get done like super fast. And it's not that I procrastinated and I should beat myself up for that. It's more that I've waited to understand my energy flow and when I'm inspired. And when I'm inspired to take action, the product is better. It's easier. It seems like less effort. It seems like less time, even though it may not be. But it just seems different. And I think that that's the benefit that I'm seeing directly in my business. So I'm curious if that's typical for people. Like if people come and get a reading from you and understand their chart better, are they going to get similar like outcomes? Like what happens for your clients when they come and work with you? And then also, how can people work with you? Like what does that look like for anyone
Yeah.
who's interested in?
So I offer a 4-week program. So what that looks like is week one, and each week we're looking at what's in your chart, but we're also working with your energy phases as they shift. So for females, we go through shifts over 28 or so days, right? So we're looking at phase one is the lowest energy phase. How can you be the most productive in that phase? Not productive as in how much work can you cram into as much time without burning yourself out. It's learning that productivity is sometimes not doing much so that you can pay attention to the downloads that you get, the inspiration, so you have a chance to be creative, right? That you're not blocking those things. And then we look at your chart to see what kind of challenges are there and how we can gently remove those and work towards getting more in alignment, right? I say human design is like a chiropractor for your soul, right? It's like it's there to get you in alignment. The second week, we look at connection. So this is all about connecting with your ideal client, community, whatever it is, that, bringing that right energy into your business. And I look at a social media strategy that is aligned with your human design. The third phase is, when you have that peak energy, and this is when those manifestations kind of actualize. And now it's time to take action. So when you're manifesting something big, it's great to bring other energy into it, right? So I always say, like, you can go to the store and buy like a little piece of furniture and put that together yourself, right? But if you want to build a 5-bedroom house that's safe to live in, you wouldn't want to build that yourself, and it will take a very long time, right? So you want to bring other people in who are skilled at that, who can help you, right? So this phase is all about collaboration and expanding your energy so that you can manifest what you want a lot faster, and also share your gifts, because that's what we're here to do. And the last phase is all about caring for yourself and looking at the details. This is when you're more detail oriented, when that energy is going back down. So this is a time to look back at the last three phases and sort of put your strategy together. So we come up with these rituals that you can do every week. That's how I work through human design with my clients. And I think that what what I find is that, yes, like you were saying, you start one thing and then you start another, right? Like as a generator, it is good for you to focus on one thing at a time. But sometimes in our chart, we might be starters and not finishers, or finishers and not starters, right? So, like in my chart, I have that part that finishes things. I can come in to a project that someone else has started and then I finish it, right? Or I make it better, or I transform it somehow. So that's part of my design. Um, there's just so many different pieces and parts that, when we're talking about building a more soul aligned business, which is what I work on with my clients, is, really taking a look at that and the energy of their business, because your business also has its own design. So your business has a mission, your business has things that it wants for your clients, for you, for your relationship. So it's it's necessary to look at that as well and say, okay, how do I collaborate with my business? What parts am I not seeing that it wants, so that we can start attracting more people, right? Um, and I think that it's just really important when you start to work with this to follow that strategy and authority, because then you know what actions to take. And like you said, you'll know the right time to take them. And if you know the right timing and the right action, that's productivity. That's getting things done, and in a way that feels easy and good. You're not doing all of these things that you don't want to do anymore. So now it's moving a lot faster, right? It's moving more smoothly and it feels good. And I also love that you said you wanted to, as you're going through this process for yourself, you're thinking about how you can bring this to the collective. And, your incarnation cross, which I took a look at, is all about solo transformation, right? You inspire others by your own transformation. So as you're doing this transformation and bringing this to the collective, right? Because you have a lot of collective gates as well as individual ones. So, what you're doing, you're really on the right path, in my opinion, just by looking at, your incarnation cross, your purpose, right? Yeah.
Yay!
I
That's
think it's really interesting what you can find, right? And when I started this, I I looked at my chart and I'm like, oh wow, like yes, I see that rhythm and and getting people back into natural rhythms is actually what I'm here to do. And that's what I do. I help people get back into their natural rhythm of their hormonal states, as well as, using that in their business in a way that can really help them avoid getting burnt out. And so it's just really neat when you're already doing something and you see it in your chart and you're like, oh, yes, like I'm aligned there. Right? So it feels good. And I think, yeah, there's, it's not all about like, what are you doing wrong? But it's like seeing all the things you're doing right too and feeling encouraged by that.
Yeah, and I have to ask you a very obvious question because obviously you have men here with us in the audience. So, if a man was inspired to work on his human design and he was interested in working with you, what would that look like without having luteal phases to operate on? Would he still have
You
4 week plans? Like, how does that work?
We could definitely work together, because we can use the phases of the moon. So the moon works, by it pushes and pulls up on those energy centers, just like it does everything on this planet. The water, the earth. We're not immune to the effects of the moon. So that, and it's all science, right? It's like the way the moon and the earth and the sun line up. It pushes and pulls. The gravity, the way that it all lines up, changes as all this stuff rotates. So you can look at it that way, or you can also look at it, because men go through the same phases that we do. They just go through it in 24 hours instead of 28 days. So we can look at it on a daily basis, how they can maneuver through their day rather than their week, right?
Oh man, so 24 hours is much faster than 28 days. I feel like I'm on the good end of the spectrum with the being a
But
woman for once.
but
I got more time.
that's why, it's like a lot of the systems that we have built right now, of course, were built by men, right? Because women being entrepreneurs and even working is still quite a new thing. So a lot of the systems that we have in place were built with masculine energy at the forefront of it. So, that's why men can kind of go to work every day and produce the same at the same level every day, and sort of have this daily routine, whereas women were like, okay, this week I felt great, but now this week I just want to lay in bed all day, right? So we're just different because our hormones shift differently. But it doesn't mean that you can't learn to work with your specific energy levels.
Yeah, that I think that makes sense to me. So hopefully, gentlemen, you heard that. So I'm gonna see if, because we are on Fireside and this is the option, it's not like a true podcast in a way, we can actually have audience members come up to ask questions. And so I'm curious if anybody has any questions who's here. I know Woody, you've been here, Ale, Ray, and Deborah. If you guys want to ask anything about human design, feel free to let me know and I will bring you up. And I don't know if there's a way I can, I think I can invite you guys to see if you have any questions. So I'm going to do that and see if anybody wants to join us on stage. So we'll see if anybody wants to pop up. But I think that that's really interesting about how men go through it, like, different times, but we all have hormones. And I know we both, think about hormones probably in a sense a little bit differently from some men. So, I am always thinking about my hormones and like what I'm feeling like, and, how does that work for me? Should I slow down? Should I rest? Should I do more? And I think my energy level is probably newer to me to think about throughout the day and throughout the week or the month, as I'm going through whatever I'm doing with my business. And so if I'm seeing like I have to take a nap and then I suddenly I'm like, I'm just going to stop working and take a nap in a traditional work environment. And even, me as having been a manager right before this, I would have been like, why are you napping at your desk? Like, what all is going on here, sir? Can you, what? But when you're getting paid in a way that's like 8 hours to be there and you're not supposed to do anything else, you don't really have an option to like take a nap. But as an entrepreneur, you can go and take a nap. And so it is interesting to see how just a lifestyle change of not being in an environment where I'm working for someone, but instead working for myself, I'm able to better fit my energy and my productivity to my lifestyle and what seeming to be, my well-being. And since this is like the Wellness and Woo podcast episode, we've talked all about wellness. Can you tie it back to how human design can help contribute to our overall well-being as people?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely focusing in on that authority. Um, that is one of the best ways that you can make a decision confidently, right? And not get in your head and start doubting yourself and second guessing yourself, right? When we're doing things that we don't want to do and really just draining our energy and spending our energy. If you think of energy as money, as currency, right? You wouldn't just like give cash away, right? But we do that all the time with our energy. And so, when we do these things, they have an effect on our physical bodies. They cause a lot of issues when you have a lot of stress. That cortisol, your brain loves it. It wants you to be stressed because it's like, okay, if you're stressed, then you're going to be careful, right? And you're not going to do anything crazy, right? And so, really trying to reduce that stress in your life can be very easy when you're using human design, because then you're making decisions that are aligned with who you are. You're saying no more to the things you don't want to do. You're getting out of environments that are affecting you and affecting how you feel, right? Getting maybe away from people that you don't want to be around anymore. You start to realize what's important to your health and your well-being and your mental health. And so, that's where human design really plays a role in your health. You can also take a look at some of the ways that you might want to try eating, or, that's in your human design. You might want to take a look at your environment. My environment is caves. I don't know if you can tell, but I like to be in like an area that is like, dark and like cozy and has one entrance and one exit, and like I can watch my back. Like nobody's gonna sneak up on me, and I'm not gonna let anybody in my cave if I don't want them there. So, practicing and really looking at those little parts and experimenting with them, because human design is just that. It is an experiment. You take what works for you, what feels good for you right now. You can try the other things later. You can never try anything. It's fine. It's all an experiment to see what feels good for you. And at the end of the day, if you feel good, then you're going to have less issues with your health overall.
I love that. Yeah, I know. I can't remember what my environment is, but it was shocking to me when somebody told me that was my environment. I'm like, so you mean I've been doing it all wrong the whole time? Because I like to people watch, and I like to be in environments that are like noisy and chaotic, like a coffee shop. So I can put my headphones in and like do my work. And I'm like, why do I need to have things going on around me? And then I heard that that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was like, oh no, have I been doing this wrong the whole time? So I guess it even does make you think about your preferences, and maybe that was an acquired behavior that I learned in college for some reason to study, and it just stuck with me, and it has nothing to do with what I really should probably be benefiting from, which is a totally different non-chaotic environment. So I mean, but even then I'm working from home now, and there's no stimulation for part of the day. Time goes by, I forget that I'm even here. Nobody's talked to me all day. I haven't put a word to a human. I've talked to the dog multiple times. And, sometimes I forget. So there's days where I can't do that. I have to go to the chaotic environment because I just can't be constantly in this quiet zone. So I think it is interesting for me too, because I feel like some ways when I learned about my human design, I realized where I rebel, where I'm just like, no, I need to go to the coffee shop and watch other people. So there's a lot of stuff in there.
Fun too, right? There's things that you're gonna like look at and be like, that doesn't sound like me, right? So you don't have to work with that piece if you don't want to, but it's all about doing what you want to do. My digestion is nervous, and so I have to eat while I'm working. I have to eat like with the TV on, right? And like you think about that and you're like, all of the like suggestions and stuff that people give us about like, making sure you sit down and eat and concentrate on eating and don't work while you eat, like, no, that's okay if I do that, because it's in my design and I prefer that, right? I always eat like that. I eat on the go. I'm eating while I'm feeding my son, while I'm working on the computer, while the TV's and Encanto's playing for the millionth time, right? Like, so, it's interesting when you look at like the things that people tell us that we need to be doing in order to be healthy or to what, right? And then you look at what you are doing and you look at your chart and you're like, oh, okay, that's why I eat like this. That's why I like this environment, right? Or maybe you're like, I don't resonate with that, but that's okay too, right? So it's all an experiment, and it's a fun one. It's and a very effective one. It, like you said earlier, eerily, scarily accurate. You're like, why does this thing know so much about me? But it is very, very interesting, and you learn so much.
Yeah, I'm over here giggling because I think you're right. The other thing I heard about this whole human design thing that blew my mind was that the people closest to you sometimes can kind of like connect in with you and fill in the gaps of what you're missing, or they can rub off on you and you start like doing the thing their way and you don't know why, but because it may not actually be your natural trait, but you've just been in this close proximity with this person and that's sort of what you've inherited from them. And it's kind of interesting to me when I think about relationships and people I've been with in the past, like in living relationships or just intimate relationships. And I'm like, oh, there are some serious patterns that I've been attracted to because it feels something else that I'm missing in some ways. And so, although I probably appreciate it, it might not be exactly what I need. to be making myself whole. So I also think that there's, applicability in the dating world as well. And I know that one of the main functions for human design was originally supposed to be so parents could understand their children. And that's part of this whole mix of, the moving towards everybody understanding better and elevating and the new consciousness awakening, all of these things. We have to make sure that the next generation is doing things different. And I think that's one of the cool things about human design is that it gives parents a way to understand how to parent different so that you can raise that different generation so that they can raise the consciousness, because clearly it hasn't happened with our generation. So the best thing we can do is try to give tools to other people. So in the last couple of minutes, could you just explain the parent aspect? Because I know a lot of people have kids.
Yeah.
And quickly tell me like how people can get a hold of you besides your website. I know you're on Clubhouse a bunch and your other places on Instagram and stuff. So just answer the parent question and then how to find you, and then I'll let you go on to your evening.
So, the parenting question is a great one because it has changed how I parent. I have 4 kids. Sorry, missed one there. Missed a little. We had an oops baby. Okay, so but my youngest daughter, she's 13, and then I just magically got pregnant in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, right? So we now have a little one, a little guy here. He's 17 months. So I have 4 kids, and I try to work with them on learning how to use their human design all the time. So for one of my daughters, she's very like she can never like make up her mind. She's a manifester and she doesn't know didn't know what she wanted to do. She's in 12th grade, and at this time she was in 11th, and she was like, I really don't know like what I want to go to school for. I think I want to go for psychology. And I'm like, okay. And then one night I got on my computer and I pulled up her chart and I'm like, let me look at this thing. And I started really digging into it, and I realized that she loves art. She's a great artist, and she also has something in her design and this is going really deep into it, into like the business side of things. But in her design she has something called accounting, which is not like the accounting as we know it, but it's more like record keeping. It's more like curation, right? And so I was like, what do you think about the idea of like going to school for art history? You love history, you love art, and maybe with the goal of becoming a curator, you could probably travel, you could, do all the exhibits and make sure that things look nice and where you want them. You get to curate all the art and bring in the art to different places. Like, what do you think about that idea? And she was like, I love that. Right. So now she got into SCAD, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design here. It's a great art school. She just got accepted into that, and she is going for art history. So I was able to use her chart to help her figure out what she might want to go to college for, right? And I was like, if you take art history and you do want to end up doing the psychology later, you could be like an art therapist, right? You can use that degree for that as well. So it's sort of a win-win situation. And she was like, yeah, I love that. And she hasn't strayed from that or thought, no, I don't want to do that. Like, she was like, I can't believe that this suggestion, I actually really want to do this. Like, I really, really want this. And my other daughter is a projector. And so she called me one day, right? And she's like, this lady brought kittens into work and I really want to bring one home. And I'm like, and my husband's in the background like, no. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to just say no to you, right? Like, I don't want to be like, no, you can't bring it here, right? So I was like, okay, you're an emotional projector. So as an emotional projector, you're here to ride your emotional wave. So let's wait 24 hours. And if tomorrow evening you want this cat still, we'll talk about it. And she was like, okay, deal. The next morning, she was like, you know what? I decided I don't want the cat because I work a lot. I don't know who's going to take care of it. Right. So she was able to make that decision on her own and use her human design to do it. So those are just some examples of how I use the human design in my parenting, but it's just really interesting to get to know your kids on that level, how to communicate with them, like what is their preferred way of communication and what they're here to do and what sort of skills do they have that they might not see because they're kids, right? Like, and trying to figure out what you want to go to college for, like at that age, is crazy, right? So just helping them, guide them through it, and helping them to kind of come to their own decisions is has been so beneficial in human design, and parenting. Yeah.
And it's funny because I hear stuff in what you're saying that I even am like, oh man, I actually did the psychology major and didn't do the art major. And I had the same exact choices when I left high school and my art, because I was the president of the art club. And my art teacher was like, so what are you going to do? Like, do your own ink blots, or how is this going to work? Like, you're just going to give up art completely? And I ended up doing 3 semesters or 3 quarters of art history, and it was so hard. So I am like, kudos to your daughter, because art history, remembering who did what and what time period it was and what the actual year was and what style or what country it's from, it's actually very technical information. And yeah, if you're archiving or you're doing anything like that, I mean, you have to really, really know your stuff. So I wish her a lot of luck in doing that. And then, of course, I'm an emotional generator. So I know all about having to wait. And I think a lot of the times when people date me, they're like, why does she like get angry and then disappear for like a while? And I am like, because I needed to ride my emotional wave. And now if you're allowed to come back, you'll be allowed to come back. And if not, you won't hear from me again. Like it's so funny because I see like that idea of emotion and not wanting to make a decision in emotion, because when you do that, it's usually not a decision that like is sustainable or that you really wanted. You're just kind of doing it out of the emotion, and then sometimes it could work out okay, but you don't know, because your emotion is so clouded over the whole entire situation. So I think it has been helpful to understand in human design, particularly if emotion is part of your mix, that that is something that you have to get over, and people need to give you the space or the time or the whatever to be able to get past that so you can make your decision. And especially bosses, if bosses want something, they want it right now. We talked about
Right.
this Clubhouse, with the idea of people demanding things of you and you being like, okay, well, I guess I've got to just do this thing and put my energy towards it, but it's not necessarily what I want to be putting my energy towards. And if you're feeling some sort of way about it, you're just going to sit there a salty mess, not get the
Yeah.
thing
I
done.
feel I feel bad for the emotional authorities and the reflectors with the lunar authority, because it's hard, because in the world that we live in, you are pressured to come up with an answer right away. And you should always try to avoid those situations, because you do need that time to just kind of think about it. And then, so I always suggest, like, if you're in that situation, in that 9 to 5, or whatever, and you're pressured for an answer, to just, like, request to have a little bit of time to think about it before you respond, right? So never let anybody pressure you to make a decision right then and there, because you need a little bit of time, right?
So
So
I would always force those people to make a choice. I'd be like, listen, do you want it done right, or do you want it done right now? Because if you want it done right now, it may not necessarily be done right. And I am not responsible. And if you come to me in any sort of way saying you're upset about this thing, I already done warned you that this was my timeline. And I think a lot of my bosses really saw that as me just being like a cranky, know it all essentially. But I'm like, no, I know you need me. I know you need me. So we're going to do this on my timeline. And it has nothing to do with that I just didn't want to do it. It had everything to do with the quality of the work, or what the work entailed, that it was a realistic expectation versus the unrealistic expectation I was being given. And I have such a like pusher of boundaries. And I was like, no. If I don't like this, I know my entire team is not going to like this. So I'm just going to keep pushing on behalf of everybody else. And that was always one of the reasons why I did not fit in the government in some places. I didn't fit in the local government in some places, because I'm constantly thinking about, what does the collective need and how do you get it to them better, and being willing to be that voice and that sacrificial lamb of like, hey, by the way, this is what the position should be, and it doesn't always go over well with authority above me. So here I
right.
am as
And
an entrepreneur.
you have a lot of those individual gates, right? So people who have a lot of individual gates, they are seen by the tribe, right? The whoever you're working with, right? As like, they're like, why are you always doing that? Like, why are you always doing this? Like, why are you doing it that way? Why are you always like, it's like they don't understand. They're like, you're not doing this for the tribe. You're like just off doing your own thing, but you really are like just making yourself better so that you can make the collective better, right? So they don't understand it,
So
especially.
Good.
Yeah. They don't understand you, but you're
Yeah,
doing exactly what you're supposed to do. So I love that. And your other question was, how can you find me? I'm on
yeah,
Clubhouse.
find
I'm on
you.
Instagram. So those two places pretty heavily. And that is at Mystic Mac. So same
And
as
you
my website.
a lot on Clubhouse around the rooms with business types of themes, particularly for women. So if women are on Clubhouse or thinking about joining Clubhouse and they like you, they want to hear more from you, that is a place to go and be able to get sort of a conversation dialogue with you. But a lot of the focus, like you said, is really around building your business, right? Not necessarily all about human design.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I've failed so much in business that I know I've done all of the work of of doing all of the fails and seeing what doesn't work, and now I know it does work. So yeah, I focus on business. I love helping women in business. It really is just definitely one of my biggest passions. I've always loved it, especially if you're starting a business. That's so exciting. But I've worked with women from, working 50 years in a business to just starting, right? So anywhere in between, it doesn't matter where you are. We can always look at your chart to see how you can grow a little bit more.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you to everybody who's been here with us on Fireside Live, just chilling out, giving reactions, and hanging out with us. We are going to do these episodes every once in a while. These are special episodes for the Social Impact Level Up Club because we are going to be reaching into the collective, bringing out people that are part of the community and talking about particular topics related to wellness and woo-woo things. So this is one of our more woo-woo kinds of episodes, but we did tie it back to the wellness. And I think that it's been so wonderful to have you here with us. And I'm excited to keep working with you in the future. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from me and we'll be interacting in some way a bunch of times. But I am excited that you taught us so much today in this episode. So thank you for being here. And anything you want to say just to say bye?
Yes, no, thank you for having me. I love talking about human design. So anytime you want to talk about it, I'm here, and I welcome any questions as well. So anytime I speak about this, I know it can be a lot. So if anyone ever has questions, feel free to DM me. I'm more than happy to answer your questions.
So this has been Wendy V here in the Social Impact Level Up Collective, and I'm with Mystic Maquina, who is my friend and is here to teach us human design things. So I'm sure she'll be back to talk about more of these in-depth parts of it that we just sort of scratched the surface on today. But always happy to have you come in and teach us more. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to end this show, but it's been a great conversation. So have a wonderful evening, morning, wherever you're at listening to us. And you'll hear another episode from Clubhouse in the Social Impact Level Up podcast. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Now I gotta figure